Yo guys, awesome chess blunder 24 here, and today I have a game that's played between Magnus Carlsen and Nico Georgiadis at the final round of the Biel Chess Festival 2018. This was played last year, and yeah, this is a really interesting game. I decided to show you this because I find it interesting. So Magnus Carlsen's white, Nico Georgiadis is black, and now Magnus plays e4, c5 by Nico Georgiadis. Knight to a3 is played here, and this is just shocking. This is the Sicilian defense Kronberger variation, and I doubt a world champion has ever played this variation of Sicilian before. And Magnus is probably the first one. So Nico responds with g6, knight to f3, bishop to g7, c3, just with ideas of pushing d4. Now d5, this is the main idea in the position. Pawn takes, queen takes, and bishop c4. Just hitting the queen, queen to e4. Now you could go queen to e2 here, but Magnus wants to keep all his pieces on the board. He doesn't want to waste a tempo bringing his bishop back, so he decides to go king to f1. And this is a pretty interesting choice. Here Nico plays bishop e6, and that's a game that's played between a 2500 against a 2200. Like in 2013, I can't be bothered to pronounce the name, but that player played a bishop b5, followed by bishop d7, and then after d4, knight f6, bishop to d3, queen to d5. The game ended in a draw. So instead Magnus played a different variation, and he played queen to a4, and this is a new game. Now knight to d7, and now d4 is played. If Nico Georgiadis played bishop d7, then this bishop takes on f7, and it pretty much wins the game because after king takes on f7, then this queen takes on e4, and it's just winning. So Magnus plays d4, and after knight, and if you black has any ideas of taking the pawn, trying to win a free pawn here, then it doesn't really work because firstly this knight takes on d4, and after bishop takes on d4, just going extreme to win the pawn. Well, then this bishop takes on e6, and after queen d3 check, king g1, and you can't go queen d1 because the queen is protecting d1. So you have to take, and after takes, black's just has a really horrible position, to be honest, in my opinion. He has double e pawns, and he has king safety sort of compromise here. So not a good idea to win the pawn. So he played knight f6, developing bishop g5, bishop takes on c4, queen takes on c4, queen to d5, going for an early queen trade, rook to e1, e6. If you want to castle, well, you don't want to leave your pawn hanging at e7, so you play e6. Now after bishop takes on f6, well, knight takes, because if you take with bishop, then you're just gonna win the queen and win the game eventually. So knight takes on f6, and after queen to b5, knight to d7 is played. Knight to e5, just attacking the pin knight. Now a6, queen to c4, knight takes on e5, pawn takes on e5, rook to d8, just now queen takes, going for a queen trade. Now rook takes on d5, and now f4. Now we reach a position where black and white had traded everything off, except for a knight and a piece and 2 rooks basically. And yeah, Magnus's knight is slightly better than Nico's bishop, so yeah, Nico tries to free his bishop from this blockade by playing b5, a temporary pawn sacrifice. And yeah, you can, if like for example if takes, then you're gonna win this pawn, and yeah, bishop's gonna be free. And so yeah, and also you could go for g3, just trying to protect this pawn, just enforcing the blockade. But black has takes and bishop h6, and this is just straight up. It's hard to defend. You could try this awkward move, rook to e4, but then there's rook to g8 coming, perhaps threatening rook to d1, and yeah, it's just hard to defend everything. So yeah, Magnus went for f takes on g5, and now king to e7 is played, just perhaps preparing rook h to d1, d8, sorry. h4, rook takes on e5, rook takes on e5, bishop takes on e5, king to e2, activating his king and also allowing his rook to get out. b5, just perhaps attack, preparing b4 to attack the knight. Knight to c2, activating his knight. Rook to d8, and now knight to e1. c4 is played, preventing knight from getting to d3. So knight to f3 is played, and bishop to g7 is played. Knight to d2 is played, just preparing knight to e4. Now after h6, knight to e4, and now this knight has a really nice center outpost. Now pawn takes, and now rook to d5, just hitting on this g5 pawn here. It's pretty weak, double pawns, and yeah. So a3 is played, well, generally Nico's preparing a5 and b4, so you gotta be prepared for it. Now a5 is played by Nico, and now rook to e1. Now, well, bishop to g7 is played here, and now just g3. You gotta play something here, like a waiting move here. And also, yeah, white has a plan of going king f3, king g4, just infiltrating the king side. So now king to f8, just, trying to go to g6, hitting this pawn here, bring his bishop to d8, that's his plan. Now king to f3, king to g7, king to g4, and now king to g6. Now, yeah, he's just trying. Now next he's gonna bring his bishop to d8 and attack the pawn. Now rook to f1 is played, and now rook to d3, just hitting this g3 pawn. Now rook to f3 blocking, and now rook to d1 is played, just preparing rook to b1 and hitting this weak pawn. Now rook to f2, and now just rook back to d5. Now knight to d2. Now bishop to c7. Just launching a discovered attack on this pawn here. Now knight to f3 is played to defend it, and now bishop d8 is played, just triple attack. And now Magnus plays the only good move here, which is knight to h4, and now just kicking the king away, king to g7 is played. And now yeah, Nico now when Magnus plays knight to f3, and Nico should be repeating the moves, repeating the position, get a draw. But instead, he wanted more. He goes ambitious and played bishop b6. Now rook e2 is played, and now bishop to c7 is played here, just hitting this pawn. Now rook to e4 is played, preparing rook to d4, and now bishop to d6, which is not a good move. Bishop to b6 was better, preventing rook to d4. So yeah, Magnus just takes advantage of it and plays rook to d4. Rook takes, knight takes, and now just b4. Sorry guys. Now a4, just avoiding trading the pawns, and now b3, and yeah, perhaps after a long game, Nico seems to think he has a fine position here. He thinks that after like something like king to f3, then he has bishop to a3, and if it takes, then just straight up b2 here, or even he even calculated this knight to c6, and then after bishop to a3, knight takes on a5, bishop takes, knight takes, bishop takes, and yeah, Nico thought he would have a winning position, but he missed a move that Magnus Carlsen played, and it's knight to f3. Yeah, and yeah, this is just winning here. He didn't realize his c4 pawn was this weak. Like, he has a dark square bishop and he can't defend it at all. So yeah, so if he tries bishop a3 again, which is the best move in this position apparently, after b takes a3 and b2, then it doesn't really work because there's knight to d2, and yeah, you can't promote, and your white's just a piece up. So yeah, Nico spent a clear 20 minutes thinking here, and yeah, he just decides to resign. And yeah, Magnus Carlsen won the game in the final round, but not the tournament. The tournament, Shakir Mamedyarov won the tournament here after defeating Magnus Carlsen in the round before that. And yeah, that is all guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and see ya.